climbs off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
finally found somebody who could make me be true, make me be blue, and even be glad just to be sad, thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be.
The WARBIRDS in review. Year number 12, episode number 4. Ladies and gentlemen, we're flying a tight formation here with two of the greatest women in aviation. Miss Bee Haydu, right here on my right. She was an original World War II WASP. We're going to talk extensively about that. And on her right is United States Air Force Major Caroline Jensen. Welcome, Caroline. Have a seat, lady. Well, welcome to Oshkosh again, Bee. You've been here several times, and it's been my honor to do 2 or 3 of these programs with you, but welcome back. Just turn it on and wait. 3 seconds. Yeah. That's good.
I can fly them.
It's on. And just hold it real close.
I can fly an airplane, but I can't fly a microphone.
Caroline, as you can see, is one of the U.S. Air Force Thunderbirds, and she's the right wing number 3 position. We're going to talk about the Thunderbirds, but mainly we're going to talk about the difference of the way things are done nowadays and the way they were done back in 1942. B, tell us what the WASP did, who they were, where you trained.
The WASP were formed to relieve men for active duty. We were initially started by Jacqueline Cochran, who's decided that it would be a good idea to train women the same as men. She'd been trying since 1938 to convince General Arnold that the women should be trained. She wasn't successful until towards the end of 1942, when he was really getting desperate for pilots. Her idea was we should do every job in the United States that there was. And what a lot of people don't realize is that for every combat pilot, you need at least 12 service pilots. So we were stationed eventually at 120 different airports, doing all the jobs that were done in the United States. We towed targets, we towed gliders. I personally did engineering test flying and utility pilot. We flew at night so that the beacons could practice finding an aircraft. We flew gunners so they had practice in shooting from a moving aircraft. In other words, every job, and there were about 22 different jobs, were done by the women. I like to think that we were extremely helpful at a time of need.
Yes, you were, and you flew everything in the inventory, from B-17s to P-51s to Corsairs, you name it, they flew it.
Including the B-29.
Including the B-29. And Jackie Cochran, for those of you that are not familiar with that name, was a pioneer woman aviator. She flew everything that they had in the Air Force, actually set a bunch of speed records in an F-104, and a real character, too, wasn't she, Bee?
Oh, yes, she was. She was very determined. She really wanted the women to be able to do everything. And she proved that they could. You know, as most of you know, an airplane knows no sex.
No, it doesn't. You know, I have the opportunity to train a lot of pilots with the airline I was with, and I would do that to a new captain, especially a female captain. I said, you know what? Airplanes don't care what color you are or what your gender is. They don't care, and you'll be just as dead as anybody else if you don't do the right thing. Contrast to Caroline with your training nowadays, and by the way, she gave me permission to call her by first name, Major. Would you please contrast it with your training and how things were different when you went through school, pilot training?
Well, I definitely think that I have Bee and the other WASPs to thank that when I went through my training and while I flew in combat and flew in fighters, I was a pilot, not a female pilot. So I didn't really feel any different now that I'm a Thunderbird and the third female Thunderbird to fly in the demonstration. I get a little more attention for that, but before that it was just kind of another characteristic of who I was. I have brown eyes and I'm a female and I can fly an airplane just as well as anybody else in my squadron.
Well, I tell you what, I was an Air Force pilot myself, and I can attest to how hard the training is because I was the only guy in my class that did not have a college degree. And the first day on base, a colonel called me in charge called me up, and he said, "Lieutenant Boland, you might as well go home." And I said, "Why is that, sir?" He said, "You're the only guy in your class that doesn't have a college degree, and this course is too hard. You'll never make it." So when I finished first in my class in flying and number 10 in academics, I went back to see the colonel and I said, "Sir, thank you." He said, "For what?" I said, "For the incentive."
Good for you.
Anyway, Caroline, I know for a fact that every Air Force fighter pilot worth his or her salt would love to be a Thunderbird, and you didn't get chosen just because you're a woman. So tell me how that process goes about.
I think it's early winter, they solicit applications from the entire Air Force. So to come into the team, at the time I was selected, you needed at least 1,000 hours of fighter type time. And then you go and you find 5 commanders that you used to work for, hopefully they're generals, and they would love to write you a letter of recommendation, tell everybody what a great pilot and officer you are. You write, you take all of your flight evaluations, so everything you've ever done from the time you're a lieutenant till present day. They look through any downgrade or hopefully not downgrades that you had in your record. And then you have to actually have a full-length photo of yourself so they show you know how to wear your uniform properly. It's a good thing. So we started out with about 40 people who apply, and then they narrowed that down to 12. And those 12 people will go on the road to an air show. And it's usually about a week into the team's travel season. So you go to an air show and you see everything from the C-130 or whatever aircraft they have being downloaded. There's 120 people on the team. We usually travel with about 60, and to see the team get everything off the cargo and where it needs to be within about 45 minutes is a pretty awe-inspiring thing. And then you see the Thunderbirds fly over and do the arrival, and you go through that and you see everything, Make-A-Wish, hospital visits, school visits, the air shows themselves, the autograph line afterwards, and you do that for about 3 days worth, plus 2 days before and a couple afterwards. They take those 12, narrow it down to 6. Those 6 do everything all over again a month later, and then it takes a couple months from that to narrow it down to the final 2 or 3, depending on the year, who's going to fly in the demonstration. So it's a pretty long, drawn-out process. They give you plenty of time to crack if you can't handle the stress of the sun and all the people around you. But it's a great process, and it's a lot of fun. I feel really honored to get to represent not only the current people in the Air Force, nearly 700,000, but also represent my heritage, like women pilots and other veterans and people who've gone before me.
Wow, from what I just heard, I think the Air Force did a pretty damn good job of picking you.
Thanks.
Our situation might have been a bit different, that is, as far as being accepted into training was concerned, because there were 25,000 women that actually applied, and only 2,080 were accepted, and out of that, 1,074 actually graduated the program. However, we were allowed to have up to a high school education. College was not required, and I was one of the fortunate ones who was accepted, even though I only had a high school education. But
I tell you what, last year we had 8 Tuskegee Airmen up here, and we talked about the prejudice that they went through in their training, of course, down in Tuskegee, Alabama back in the 40s. It was not very conducive to being very pleasurable for a black person. But Bee, did you encounter any type of prejudice going through training from any of the instructors?
well, I always made sure in training, because we wore men's coveralls, which we dubbed zoot suits. And I always made sure that I had goodies in the pockets of the coveralls to hand out before we went flying. So I guess that helped. But there was some prejudice. However, we were told, we were given quite a handbook before we started training of the things that we could or could not do. And it specifically said, if there is a personality clash between you and your instructor, do not hesitate to ask for another instructor. I was very fortunate. I had excellent instructors. And so personally, during training and even afterward, I did not encounter. However, there were some who did, and I'll give you an example. Some women after graduation were sent to a B-26 school to be checked out in the B-26. Well, when they arrived, the officer that was going to check them out said, "I'm not teaching any damn women how to fly." Well, it was an order. He had to teach the damn women how to fly. However, one of the women got even with him. She married him. True story.
Caroline, I know how proud I was when my mom pinned on my silver wings in Big Spring, Texas in 1968. I know that's a proud moment for any aviator, but tell us about that. How'd you feel?
Mine was a proud moment. It involved my dad, and my dad is one of the reasons that I'm sitting here, and I decided for a career to be in military aviation. He flew helicopters in Vietnam, and he was in the Marine Corps, and he always pushed me to achieve my goal. And when I first decided I wanted to be a Thunderbird, women weren't allowed in combat aviation. And I told that to my dad. I was like, well, I want to be a fighter pilot. And he actually went out and bought a book about the WASP and gave that to me to tell me, see, they can fly. They flew everything there was. So he always encouraged me. And then the day that I graduated from pilot training, he was there, and he pinned my wings on me. So it was really special and important to me to honor him and his service and carry on.
B, when you got out of training, you finished up on the T6? What airplane did you finish up and get your wings on?
Well, we had cross country in the AT-6 and the PT-17. And there it is, right behind me. I flew that.
She flew this very airplane right here. We're going to talk with the owners about that in a few minutes. But this airplane was at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas in 1944 when Bay went through pilot training. And she has flown this very airplane sitting right here on the ramp at Oshkosh this morning. We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
But the last phase of training, the first phase was about 70 hours in the Stearman. And that in itself was quite a jump because I had been flying 65 horsepower side-by-side tailorcraft. And then we came to Sweetwater and Avenger Field, and we were flying 220 horsepower PT-17s. Well, it was towards the end of 1943 when they decided that they would see if they could eliminate one of the phases of training to speed up the training. And so they chose the elimination of the BT-13 because, as most of you know, you went from a primary trainer to a basic trainer to an advanced trainer. So they wanted to eliminate the BT-13. So we went from the Stearman 220 horsepower directly into the AT-6, 650 horsepower. And that was quite a jump. But as far as cross-country is concerned, we had to fly in the Stearman on cross-country as well as the AT-6. And I had a very wise instructor. He said, now, when you're flying in that PT-17 and you go to turn your charts, they could easily fly out, but don't panic. What you do is you look for a railroad track. You follow that railroad track. You'll come to a town. You land. You go to the base and say, you know, I need charts. My charts flew out, and continue on. But be very careful. Fly way to the right of that railroad track because you're almost certain to meet a Navy pilot coming the other way.
There has always been a rivalry, sometimes not so gentle rivalry, between the Air Force and the Navy about who has the best pilots. Well, I'll just say this. As an Air Force pilot, anybody that can land on the pitching carrier deck at night in all kinds of weather has certainly got my respect. And the Navy and the Air Force have completely different missions, and they're both very good at what they do. So my hat's off to all you naval aviators out there. By the way, how many veterans in the audience? How many veterans? Raise your hands. God bless you. God bless y'all. I don't know if Connie's still here. Connie Boland, you still here? I'd like to introduce my sister-in-law, Connie Boland. Come on, Connie, say a word. Connie is the founder and chairman of WARBIRDS in Review, this program. I especially wanted her to come up today. We're talking about women in aviation, and she was the first woman in my life in aviation. She came up through the ranks flying civilian airplanes to flying, well, I'll let her tell you a little bit about it, but she's a wonderful person, and she's the reason why we're here today. Connie Boland.
Thank you, Danny. Danny said I'd like to introduce you, and I said, that's fine, introduce me. This is the ladies' program, but I don't want to talk. So what's he do? Thank you very much. It's your program. Okay, I give them free rein with the program. I'd like to thank the ladies for being here today, and especially Bee. You were an inspiration. Bee Haydu and the other WASP made it possible for me to continue with my career in aviation, whether it was a noticeable contribution or whether it was just the fact that they not only proved that women could fly airplanes, but they are a classy group of ladies. So I have attempted to live up to not only your piloting skills, but the fact that you are ladies. So thank you very much.
If I can
Thank you, Connie.
intercede, we have some more WASPs here, and I'd like them to stand up and wave to you.
You done with me?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for coming today. I want to pay tribute to Connie. She works so hard putting these programs together and getting people from all over the world here. Last year, I interviewed Nguyen Hong Mi and the fellow that shot him down over North Vietnam in 1972, General Dan Cherry. And Hong Mi came all the way from Hanoi here last year, and it was a fascinating tale. You can pick up that book, My Enemy, My Friend, over here in the Warbird merchandise area. It's an uplifting book. Let's talk more about how the Thunderbirds are doing now with the sequester.
It's my favorite topic.
How do you staying current?
We did a lot of things during our off time. We did our last flight on the 5th of April, and until just recently. So you guys might have heard we recently got some more funding from Congress, and we were able to get 140 flight hours for the Thunderbirds to resume flying, not demonstrations, but just those basic things that all pilots need to know, like flying instruments, landings, emergency landings, going back down to low altitude. So I've flew one time in a Thunderbird aircraft since the 5th of April, right before I came out here. But we've used that time to do a lot of things. When you're a Thunderbird, when you guys think about the Thunderbirds, you probably think about 6 jets in the air. And when you're on the team, that demonstration is about 5% of what we do, and the rest of it is going out into communities and meeting people, going to hospitals, doing Make-A-Wish, going into the schools. So we did a lot of that in the Las Vegas area because we weren't able to travel outside of that due to funding. So we did that, and then a lot of people went back to school. I took 3 master's classes, and there's quite a few guys who are working on their bachelor's, other people on their master's, and other degrees. So we have definitely made the most of our time. We still don't know what next season's going to bring, so that's still up in the air, but we're hoping for good news, and we're definitely going to be ready for it.
Thank you. I know I'm hopping back and forth here, 70 years difference, but I want you to get the contrast of what things were like then for Bee and what they're like today with Caroline. Bee, when you got out of flight school and you decided that you were going to, which airplane did you decide you really wanted to fly is my question.
Well, I always liked the twin engine, and I was stationed at Pecos, Texas, where I flew the UC-78, the AT-17. Those are advanced twin-engine aircraft with lots of nicknames like double-breasted cub, bamboo bomber, woodpecker's delight, because it had wooden wings. I was doing, as I said, engineering test flying and also utility pilot. I liked cross-country. I wanted to be chosen for the ferry command, but at that juncture they had enough in the ferry command, so I was in the training command. I flew, and our base became a B-25 base January 1st, 45, but we were disbanded December 20th, 44. So I didn't get to fly the B-25, but I always kind of wanted to fly the multi-engine aircraft. I liked them. And of course, after training, after we were disbanded, most of us, I'm sure, were extremely disappointed. And I wanted to be able to continue flying, so I started writing letters to manufacturers and airlines, and never heard no said in so many different ways. So I realized I was going to have to do it on my own. So I went back to New Jersey and got my instructor's rating and did freelance instructing and did freelance ferrying of aircraft, because they were ferrying a lot of aircraft from the southern states up to the northern states where you could buy them extremely cheap. I've forgotten now the price of P-51s, but everyone would shudder if they could hear that. Then that led to my having a ferrying business, ferrying the new aircraft that were being manufactured for people, which in turn led to my getting a Cessna dealership. And they had a wonderful commission setup. The first fiscal year, first 10, you got 10%. The next 5, you got 15% retroactive. And the next 5, you got 20% retroactive. So you better be sure I sold 20 airplanes in 1 year, even though I had to buy the last 2 myself. But I got that 20%. And I used that to become part owner of a flight school. And it was in there that I met my husband, who was a Stearman instructor for 3.5 years in World War II. And he could make that airplane stand up and say woof. He was a great pilot, wonderful guy, and I'm sorry that I lost him in '06. But we had a wonderful life together. We both flew up to our late 70s. We owned about 14 different aircraft and just had fun flying.
I tell you what, I've lost so many friends up here at Oshkosh, hopping from one fighter to another, or you know, doing crazy stuff they shouldn't be doing. So my question to you, B, is how in the world are you still alive today, flying one airplane in the morning, another type airplane in the afternoon? How the heck do you do that?
Blindfolded.
No, I'm serious. That's a skill, to be able to hop into one airplane after flying another one that morning and be able to, you know, operate efficiently and safely.
Well, you have to know your airplane.
Yes.
That's for sure. I mean, if you're going to be foolish enough to take an airplane up and try to second guess it, you're in for trouble. So it's something you just do.
I interviewed Dawn Seymour up here, one of you guys, compadres, and Dawn is a rather tall lady. She's probably 5'10" or so. And when I was talking about flying the B-17, I fly for EAA, I said, you know, I'm 6 feet, and sometimes I need every bit of that rudder pedal, so how in the world did little women fly B-17s in World War II? She said, of course, we had the seat as far forward as we could. They had extra seat cushions, and one lady said she had some articulating clamps to put on the brakes on the rudder pedals so they were a foot longer. So she'd slip her shoes up under those straps on those articulating plates, and she had much more rudder that way. I thought that was pretty cool. That's right. Let's go back. All right, you got your wings, and which airplane did you pick out of flight school?
I actually chose to stay and fly the T-38. My leg B, my husband's in aviation as well. We graduated from the Air Force Academy, got married that day, and went through pilot training together. We went to Korea together. But our first assignment was in Del Rio, Texas at Laughlin Air Force Base flying T-38s. And I think they make airplanes smaller these days because I was able to reach everything. I'm 5'8", so, and same thing in the F-16. Once I got to that, it actually felt a little bit claustrophobic, like things are pretty close the first time you get in. But then once you start the engines and take off, you kind of feel like Wonder Woman in her invisible jet. Everything kind of goes away and you just see what you need to see and get all that information. But I love them both, but I really enjoyed the T-38 flying, and the F-16 is a great platform for demonstrations.
I soloed the T-38 January the 1st, 1968. My instructor stepped out and he said, no, stay there. And I said, what? And you were supposed to have, I forget, let's say 10 takeoffs, and 10 periods before the solo you and I had about 7 or 8. And he said, stay there. He said, take it around 3 times. And I was startled. I said, sir, I'm not ready. And he said, if I thought you were not ready, do you think I'd let you take a multi-million-dollar airplane out for a spin? And that's as scared as I've ever been in my life. I had no idea what I was doing.
I remember the first time I soloed I flew gliders first and I had soloed it, but the first time I soloed a Cessna, I remember taxiing out, my feet are holding the brakes, and my legs are shaking, and the same thing happened to the T-37. I won't tell who my instructor was, but I'd kind of messed something up. He said, never tell anybody you did this. He's like, you're ready to go, you're good. And same thing, we land, you shut down one engine, he hops out, and then I will never forget, he grabs my name tag, takes his wings off, and puts them on my chest, and he says, you can't fly without wings, and so you got my wings up there.
Wow.
And my legs were still shaking when I was holding the brakes, but it went awesome.
B, which airplane did you solo in the first time?
Side-by-side 65 horsepower tailcraft.
Wow.
No electric starter. You had to pull the prop through. And in those days, before you soloed, you had to be able to get it into a spin and out of a spin before you were even allowed to solo. But during training in the PT-17, we used to have spot landings. So what they do is they, put a line here and then a line over there, and you're supposed to land on it. And again, I had a very smart instructor, because when you pull back on the throttle on the Stearman, sometimes it goes sput, 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 so it needs a little jazz. So he said, if you see you're a little bit low, don't forget to jazz up that engine a little bit, because you don't want it to conk out while you're just taught us how to cheat.
What's the best attribute of a good instructor? What's his best attribute, do you think?
I guess having faith in you. Now I have heard that when the male instructors with the male pilots, I don't know that we ever had any like that, they were very harsh, and they would take the stick and waggle it back and forth and hurt the poor student in the back, not realizing that the guy's really trying. I mean, he doesn't want to fail. And I think just being gentle and just telling you what you're supposed to do and waiting for you to do it. And some people take a little bit longer than others.
Right.
So just be patient. So that's a good instructor, not somebody that's going to wang your legs.
What do you think, Carol?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's learning to know how your student learns. I had 1,000 hours flying T-38s and pilot training on 2 separate assignments, so there's some guys that you have to yell at. There's some guys that you have to speak calmly to, some guys and gals that you have to give them a demonstration, and some will just be able to take your words and to execute what you tell them to do. So it's in a couple rides, the fewest rides, you can figure out how that student will best learn, whether it's berating or praising. That's how they're going to learn the quickest.
My instructor was Captain Dave Bittenbinder, 6'5", half Cherokee Indian, half German. One of the greatest guys I ever met. Later got killed in Vietnam, but anyway, I'm going through training, and I was having a hard time with instruments. I couldn't get it. You know, I just hadn't put it all together with the flight director and all that in T-38. And Dave, being a real quiet guy, he didn't say much. And he said, today we're going out, we're going to do an instrument ride. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to do a GCA, you're going to do an ILS, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And I'm not going to say a word. He said, I don't care how bad you screw up, go to the next maneuver, and I will not say a word. I said, yes, sir. And we did. We flew everything. I did the best I could. He just sat back there and watched. And we come in final, and we pitched out, and we did the normal traffic pattern. And you had to repeat your final down 3 green, pressure and quantities normal, approach speed is 165 or whatever it was. You had to repeat that, whether you were solo or dual. And I did. I pitched out, came around, down 3 green, pressure quantity normals, approach speed is 162. And I just about get ready to flare. Dave goes, click, dumbass. And I look at everything looks good, and I go around. And I pitch out again, I ask him, Captain Bittenbinder. He wouldn't answer. So I did the whole pattern, came around, down 3 green, pressure quantities normal, approach speed's 158. I just about get ready to land, click, dumbass. I go around again. Now I don't have enough fuel to go around the 3rd time. So I said, Captain Bittenbinder, what did I forget? He said, check the 0 delay lanyard on your parachute. I had forgot to hook it up below 10,000 feet. I'd never miss that again. That's a good instructor. Patience.
I thought you forgot the gear. I thought you forgot the gear.
No. Listen, we're up here today with this beautiful aircraft that belongs to, let me get my notes here to make sure I get names right. It belongs to Andy and Mike Porter, and they are here. Andy, Mike, come on up if you would. Now, this airplane was actually flown by Bee, as we said, at Sweetwater, Texas, at Avenger Field. Now, this guy talks kind of funny. He's even worse than me with my southern accent. He talks really funny. But go ahead, tell us about the airplane, how you got it and everything.
Okay, good. Yeah, we first saw this Stearman. It was white, had a black and red stripe running down the side. It was in a ride business back in New Jersey. And Mike and I actually got hired by the ride business to fly up to the Statue of Liberty, World Trade Center, the Intrepid, cross over Jersey side, fly back to the statue, Verrazano Bridge. It was a wonderful ride. It took about an hour. Michael loaded thousands of flights in this and other biplanes and a T6 in the ride business. Finally, in 1997, the airplane came up for sale. Well, we knew that it was going to need a lot of work and restoration. Nobody knew its history. Nobody really cared. It had just been used as a working airplane. So Mike went ahead and got the history from the Smithsonian and the Air Force. And lo and behold, to our absolute pleasure, we discovered that it was a WASP airplane at Avenger Field, and that lit our fire. We had been enthusiasts of the WASP, but now we had a WASP airplane. We spent the next 10 years collecting parts. pretty much everything from the rudder to the front end. I mean, it just needed restoration. During that time, Michael had grown from being 12 years old to 16. He soloed this airplane on his 16th birthday in New Jersey.
In February.
Yeah, in February. So anyhow, 2007, we've got all the parts put together, and we decide we're going to do the restoration. So Mikey gets a razor blade and down the side, away we go. Put it back exactly as it was at Avenger Field. We've got pictures here of the airplane at Avenger Field. Actually, prior to being at Avenger Field, it was at Union City, Tennessee, which I believe you're very familiar with, Dan. It's your...
My first chief pilot at the airline went through flight training at Union City, Tennessee, and my family farm is at Martin, Tennessee. It's been in my family since 1836.
Great. Well, then number 12 flew over your head.
Many times flew over my farm.
You
many
probably
times.
cursed it. Yeah. Anyhow, so we started the restoration. That's when Michael really started to earn his stripes. He was in A&P school at the age of 16 to 18, having got his high school diploma at 16. He went to Naval Air Engineering School, Lakehurst, New Jersey, the Hindenburg Hangar. That's where he got his A&P school. 3 years later, he got his IA inspection authorization. The Dallas FSDO at that time told us he was the youngest IA in the country. 12 years later, he's running a restoration business. He's got 4,000 hours, 2,800 hours in a Stearman. Actually, just one point I'd like to say. Both these wonderful ladies have flown in WASP number 12. Mikey, you tell how Major Caroline flew.
Well, the story starts out at Sun and Fun last year, and I found out about Carolyn flying with the Thunderbirds, and I know about the WASP history, and I knew that she would like to know about it a little bit more with this aircraft and its background. So I come up to her and say, here's my aircraft, come take a look at it, and if the opportunity ever arose at another show, maybe I could get you up in the airplane. And there was a little bit of red tape to go through, but at the Indianapolis Air Show, we were able to make that happen, and we had a great flight. What did you think?
It's pretty awesome. I like flying, whether you're at, how many knots?
Oh, about 90.
90 knots or 450 knots. So the thing turns on a dime. It was pretty awesome. I really enjoyed it, and it was really sentimental to me too, sitting there thinking about the WASP there in that same seat, learning how to fly and land and turn and navigate 70 years ago, and I was wearing my Thunderbird uniform thinking how proud that they would be of what they had started and where it ended up and where it's going.
Absolutely.
Sitting in the audience are two of my friends, Cliff Walker and Dick Spear, both captains with Northwest Airlines. Raise your hands, guys. I was trying to think of the first female pilot we had at the airline, Charlotte Wall. Charlotte Wall was the very first female pilot we had. The little old Southern Airways I started with back in 1969. That was the first female airline pilot I had ever seen. And when I retired 10 years ago from Northwest, my last check ride was given by a real petite 5'4" check airman on the 747-400. So that's how far we've come. There were no Air Force pilots when I got my wings, none whatsoever. What's the percentage now, do you know?
I do. Actually, I got to go to Sweetwater a couple months ago for the homecoming for the WASP and talk to him, and I researched it. And as Bee said, there were 1,074 women who earned their silver wings, and the 2012 stats was 1,119 women are currently flying. That was as of 2012. So it's roughly 20% of the Air Force are women today, and about 4.5% of pilots are women. And as far as women who fly in the fighter community between all the services, it's roughly about 100 women that have the opportunity to do that now.
All right, I'm going to go down the line here, and I want each of you to give me your last thought about what this airplane means to you, what your piloting experiences mean to you here at Oshkosh, and then I'm going to ask you one last question, and I'm going to ask you that question now, let you be thinking about it. But if the good Lord says you can have one more flight, which airplane is it going to be, and why? Okay, so we'll start down here on the end. What does bringing your airplane to Oshkosh and meeting people like Bee and Caroline mean to you?
I had intended to say this earlier, but I'd like to thank EAA, WARBIRDS of America, Scott's Miracle-Gro, Connie Boland, everybody involved with this incredible presentation area. We've been here, well, it's the fourth time number 12's been here. And it's just an incredibly exciting experience. People are wonderful, very friendly. If I had to fly one last flight, I'd have Mikey fly me. In fact, I'd like, when my ashes, let's get morbid, have him toss me out, number 12.
Well, for me, bringing this airplane to Oshkosh is about keeping the history alive. These ladies don't get enough credit, in my opinion. They prove, not only for women, but everybody in general out here, if you have something you want to do, a dream, a goal, whatever it is, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Develop the skill, keep your feet firmly planted on the ground, and go for it. Absolutely 100%. That airplane, when we bought it, I had a lot of people saying you would never get it to this level. They said, take a can of gasoline and put a match to it. There it is. We're keeping it alive, and I intend to keep doing that. That's what it means to me. So, and I want to say thank you to both of you and everybody here. No, that's what it is for me. And last flight probably would be in the Stearman for me. I mean, that airplane's going home to me. So.
Caroline?
That's a difficult question. I know, I guess I would go back to where I started, flying gliders off of a tow plane, and you get up there and it's just silent and calm and gliding, and I don't know, I really enjoyed that, so that's kind of where I started. But whatever I'm doing, I'll have the WASP patch with me, like I carry all the time, to honor my heritage, so thank you.
Bee, sum it up for us.
The question was about the Stearman.
The first question is, you know, what does all this mean to you all these years later to come up here and associate with people like Caroline, and your legacy has been passed down today, I think.
Well, I want to say one thing about the Stearman. That is the best airplane to learn to fly in. And the best instruction that you can get in any aircraft is the military. They are just wonderful. And as far as what airplane would I like to fly on my last flight, I better say the Stearman. My husband might be listening.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for that. For me, you know, every year as a historian for EAA and coming up here and meeting all these wonderful people every year, what a payoff. Because of Connie and my brother Ed and being involved with EAA and WARBIRDS of America, I have met Tex Hill, General Robin Olds, General Gunther Rawl, numerous, Bud Anderson, Jack Roush, numerous people come year in, year out, and now some of those people are gone. But I got to sit down with them, have a beer with them, have dinner with them, and talk with them about aviation. So for me, if I had one last flight, but I'm really confused now because I want to fly with you one time, Caroline, in that F-16, and you're probably scared the hell out of me, but I'd love to do that. But my last flight would be in a Cub also, and it would be with the airspeed indicator not working, and it would be with the doors open late in the afternoon in the fall, looking at deer on the ground. And you know the Cub's about to stall because the door comes up. And when the door comes up, you better be close to the ground because you're about to hit it. Anyway, this WARBIRDS in Review is number 4. We've got 13 this week, so check back tomorrow. I've got the schedule right here. I'm going to promote Bee's book. Bee, I'm going to promote your book. Bee, just wait a minute. I've got to promote the bomb first. The bomb over there is for donations. We got a slit cut in it. When you walk by there, stick a couple of bucks in there for the Warbirds of America, and we try to keep this program going with donations. All this equipment and everything is not cheap. And now, I'm going to promote Bee's book, Letters Home, 1944-1945, Women Air Force Service Pilots by Bernice B. Falk Haydu, right here, Bernice B. Falk Haydu.
And the profits go towards all of the different museums that need money, they always need money. So I donate the profits to worthy organizations.
Bee's going to be over in the Warbird merchandise area after this program signing her book. I'm going to get my copy signed right now, and aren't you jealous? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching Warbirds in Review.
Be blue and even be glad just to be sad, thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be mean, might never be cross or try to be boss, but they